Hello, this is Tommy DeLeo, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Friday, May 29th issue of the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Judge order detain farm workers release. Kayla Kane. Rochester Democrat Chronicle, USA Today Network. Dolores Bustamante Romero, a Wayne County farm worker whose detention by ICE garnered considerable attention last month, was released from custody late May 27th. U.S. District Judge Meredith Vaca granted a habeas corpus petition that argued Bustamante was unlawfully detained when she appeared in Buffalo for a scheduled immigration appointment April 22nd. Bustamante, his attorneys argued federal officials flouted regulations that required them to provide the woman with notice and a hearing around the details of her rearrest. Vaca ordered the immediate release of Bustamante on Wednesday. Supporters said she was released from Allegheny County Jail to her family about 7 p.m. Bustamante, an apple farm worker and prominent labor rights advocate, has lived in the United States since 2003. She fled to Mexico that year to escape an abusive husband. After an unsuccessful asylum claim and several appeals, a federal judge issued a final deportation order for Bustamante in 2023. She had been allowed, however, to live and work under supervised release in the years since. During an evidentiary hearing in May 26th, federal officers could not say who revoked Bustamante's release or why, but said they planned to deport the woman to Mexico within days of her arrest. Bustamante's attorneys called her detention hurried and haphazard. Vaca's orders does not block the possibility of deporting Bustamante at a later date. Under the order, she must immediately be placed back on supervised release. If ICE moves to detain her again, however, the agency must first provide Bustamante with a written notice that includes a detention to revoke her release for an enumerated reason and by an individual with the proper authority, the judge wrote. In that case, Bustamante would also have the right to an informal review interview to contest the reasons for the arrest. Dolores is free today, but we don't know what will happen tomorrow, family and friends said in a statement. We continue to fight, not only for Dolores' case, but against the system that keeps people detained. Budget has $1.5 billion for health care aid. Emily Barnes, to State Team USA Today Network. Help appears on the way for New York's hospitals and nursing homes as more than $1.5 billion has been promised in this year's state budget to aid struggling health systems in the aftermath of federal funding cuts. The state funding comes as a total of 11 nursing homes across New York have closed or announced closures. Over the past 2 years, nearly 80% of nonprofit nursing homes are operating on negative margins statewide, according to Leading Age New York. At the same time, the passage of the Trump administration's quote-unquote big beautiful bill by Republicans in Congress last year included a set of policy changes projected to cut federal funding for Medicaid and other health programs nationally by $1 trillion over a decade, leading to a new annual $30 billion healthcare expense for New York. On Wednesday, May 27th, the State Assembly passed the Health and Mental Hygiene Bill, but which includes funding to help avoid service cuts at hospitals and nursing homes across the state. Here's what to know about the health budget bill. Will New York help close essential plan coverage gap? The Essential Plan, which is a federally funded state-run program New York created in 2015 to cover low-income workers who earn too much to qualify for Medicaid and don't get health insurance at their jobs, or offers comprehensive care with no premiums and some copays. In an attempt to mitigate the new costs from the Big Beautiful Bill, or H.R. 1, the state announced last September it would reverse its prior essential plan program expansion, resulting in the loss of nearly free coverage for 460,000 New Yorkers. Some state lawmakers tried to keep all New Yorkers covered under the Essential Plan with bills that would use state funds to provide coverage for those who will be squeezed out of the program on July 1st. However, no state assistance was included in the state budget. Assemblymember Amy Paulin, a Westchester County Democrat and Assembly Health Chair who championed one of the bills, said she will continue to keep as many New Yorkers insured as possible. And Michael Kinukan, Fiscal Policy Institute's health policy director, pointed fingers at Governor Kathy Hochul and the state legislature. Despite record-high revenue and ample spending on upper properties, from provider rates to utility rebates, policymakers failed to spend a dime to maintain coverage for the hundreds of thousands of working new-class New Yorkers set to lose health care coverage over the next 12 months, Kinukan said. Governor Hochul and legislative leaders talked a big game about affordability this year, but for 450,000 New Yorkers, health care is about to become unaffordable, he added. New York's hospitals and nursing homes get Medicaid reimbursement help. New York's hospitals and nursing homes received more than $1.5 billion in the state budget this year, including millions for Medicaid reimbursement. Specifically, hospitals will receive $706 million in inpatient and outpatient inpatient and outpatient rate investments, and nursing homes will pack up a $480 million investment. These provisions were focal points of the GNYHA's state budget advocacy and will provide a strong measure of stability for New York's hospitals in the wake of H.R. 1's massive healthcare cuts. A letter from Greater New York Hospital Association President Ken Risk says. That stability will help ensure New Yorkers continue to have access to high-quality care, the letter continued. The state's nursing homes were also allotted $57 million to partially restore their capital rate and reconciliation cut, which reduces their 15% cut to 5%, and hospitals received $94 million to downsize their 20% cut to 10%. Additionally, hospitals are picking up $250 million to restore their quality pool, which is the organization says was a key priority for them, and is funded through our successful advocacy to extend the current managed care organization tax at the federal level through December 31st, 2026. HAYNYS is immensely grateful to the governor and legislature for advancing significant multi-year investments in our hospitals and nursing homes, a statement from the Healthcare Association of New York State President and Bay Graus says. These providers will continue to face chronic expense pressures alongside many new fiscal challenges that are threatening the ability to keep their services available and doors open for their community members, Grouse added, noting the budget's healthcare-related investments are deeply needed and will help maintain and enhance all New Yorkers' access to healthcare. However, some nursing home advocates aren't entirely pleased with the outcome. Leading Age New York, the statewide association that represents not-for-profit and public long-term care and aging services providers, pushed for an equal split of funding for hospitals and nursing homes, as they say the cost of providing nursing home care in New York rose by 51% between 2007 and 2024, while the reimbursement rate only increased by 12.8%. The year's budget increases nursing home Medicaid funding by about 6.4%, the group says. While appreciative, we are compelled to express disappointment as these investments must be viewed in the context of a long-term care system that is in crisis due to decades of underfunding, Sabrina Barrett, head president and CEO of Leading Age New York, said in a statement on Wednesday. Home care and hospice providers are also experiencing Medicaid shortfalls, but did not receive additional funding in this final budget. Barrett continued. That widening gap has left providers across the state grappling with serious financial strain, persistent workforce shortages, and mounting difficulty in meeting the needs of older adults and their families. Barrett also said the future depends on increased, sustained state investment that matches the true needs. Final bill gives details on utility rebates, new New York City tax. Emily Barnes, New York State Team, USA Today Network. New Yorkers finally have long-awaited answers on details surrounding New York City's pied-a-terre tax, statewide energy rebate checks, and a tax on alternative nicotine products. The last of the policy-filed bills, the state's revenue budget bill, was passed by State Senate and Assembly on Wednesday, May 27th. And also includes a state-level deduction for tipped income up to $25,000 and the extension of the state's residential energy storage exemption for 2 years, as well as exemptions, reimbursements, and credits for certain alternative fuels for 5 years. Here is what to know. New Yorkers could receive $200 energy rebate checks. The state budget is spending $1 billion on one-time protecting our wallet's energy rebate, or power credits for 8.2 million New York taxpayers. You'll be eligible for the checks, which are expected to be mailed between September and December if you were a full-year New York resident in 2024. Filed a timely tax return for 2024, had a state-adjusted gross income of $300,000 or less, if you filed jointly in 2024, or $150,000 or less if you were a single filer or married but filed separately in 2024. You won't be eligible if you were claimed as a dependent by another, or taxpayer in 2024. Here is how much you could earn. Filers with incomes up to $150,000, $100. Married filers with incomes above $150,000, but less than $300,000, $150. Married joint filers or surviving spouse filers with incomes up to $150,000, $200. How will New York's pied-a-terre tax work? New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani has pushed to tax the rich throughout his campaign, as well as the first several months of his leadership of the Big Apple. As the state's allowance of a pied-a-terre tax is a very watered-down version of that. Estimated to rise $500 million in revenue for the city, the tax will ultimately affect those with non-primary properties valued at $500 million or more by July 1st, 2028, and run through mid-2031. And while some lawmakers had pushed to extend the tax beyond the city, which made waves, it ultimately wasn't included. Will nicotine products be taxed? Alternative nicotine products, such as nicotine pouches, will be included in the state's 75% wholesale tax on tobacco products. Pitched by Governor Kathy Hochul and included in both houses' one-house budgets, the Hochul administration's main argument for boosting taxes on these additional nicotine products is their adverse effect on younger New Yorkers. Calls to poison control centers involving children under the age of 6 and accidental nicotine pouch ingestion increased by 736% from 2020 to 2023, according to USA Today reporting. However, business groups have argued higher taxes would lead to higher product costs and ultimately impeding adults' access to smoke-free alternatives. There is also concern that the tax would accelerate the growth of illicit sales of these products. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. U.S. and Iranian forces trade strikes. Jana Chokir and Alashray and Phil Stewart. Reuters. Dubai. Iran targeted a U.S. airbase in Kuwait on May 28th after the United States struck what Washington described as an Iranian drone operation near the Strait of Hormuz. President Donald Trump rejected a reported compromise deal with Tehran. The attacks, while limited, highlighted the fragility of negotiations to turn the 10-year early April ceasefire into a lasting agreement to end the 3-month-old war that has killed thousands and reopen the vital shipping route. U.S. Central Command said U.S. forces had shot down 5 Iranian tank drones and struck a ground control station in the port of Bandar Abbas. Kuwaiti forces then intercepted a ballistic missile fired towards the country, which hosts a large U.S. base. These actions were measured, purely defensive, and intended to maintain the ceasefire, said a U.S. official, who requested anonymity to speak candidly about military operations, told Reuters earlier. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it had targeted U.S. base responsible for an early morning attack near Bandar Abbas Airport, and that any repeat would lead to a more decisive response, Tasnim news agency reported. Kuwait condemned the attack and demanded that Iran immediately halt what it called a serious escalation. The violence, the second flare up this week, coincided with the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha, celebrated across the region. Multiple countries have been caught up in the conflict triggered by U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran on February 28th. Mediator Pakistan said its foreign minister Ishakdar are scheduled to meet the Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington on May 29th, although the significance of his visit was unclear. In Lebanon, which Iran says must be part of any overall peace deal, Israel had begun striking said it had begun striking infrastructure of Iran-backed Hezbollah militants in the southern city of Tyre because it had carried out a strike in the capital Beirut. The Lebanese army said a strike had killed one of its soldiers, while Israel, which has displaced hundreds of thousands of people with a push deep into Lebanon in the pursuit of Hezbollah, said air raid sirens had gone off in its north. Oil prices rebounded, with U.S. crude futures up more than 2% after falling 5% on May 27th. While stocks fell and the dollar rose on fading investor confidence after a peace deal that many see as key to easing global inflation risks, Trump has repeatedly said the end of the war is close, but had told reporters at a cabinet meeting in May 27th that he was not satisfied with the negotiations and that the United States was not discussing easing sanctions, one of Tehran's demands. The United States will shut down Iranian airlines' access to landing ports, refueling, and ticket sales, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said, and has sanctioned Iran's Persian Gulf Strait Authority, set up to manage passage through the strait. Trump dismissed an Iranian state TV report about an unofficial draft of an agreement to restore shipping through the Strait of Hormuz to pre-war levels within a month, with Iran and the Persian Gulf state Oman jointly managing traffic. Trump said no single country would have control over the waterway, and appeared to threaten Oman, with which U.S. has decades-long military and economic ties. It is international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, or we'll have to blow them up. They understand that, they'll be fine, he said. Oman has not mentioned the idea of joint control on the Strait with Iran. With which it says it has discussed freedom of navigation. Tehran expressed solidarity with Oman after what it called U.S. officials' threats. Iran's Revolutionary Guards said they had stopped 2 vessels passing through the strait and let 26 through in the past 24 hours. More than 100 ships would pass daily on average before the war, with passage covered by international legal guarantees. Iran says it is straightened. The Iranian Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, he said in a letter to Parliament that Iran had emerged strengthened by the war and urged legislators to preserve national unity, repair damage, and address hardship, inflation, and corruption, the state media said. Iranian media also reported that Tehran was insisting on the United States releasing Iranian funds. Iranian state TV said that the draft deal would involve the withdrawal of the U.S. forces blockading its ports and from the immediate vicinity, and that discussion about U.S. troops in the region was needed. The White House had said the report was a complete fabrication. Tehran did not comment. Iranian forces have said the nuclear issue will be discussed in further talks over 60 days, something that may not be acceptable to some of Trump's closest supporters, who want its nuclear program disbanded. Iran says the program is for peaceful purposes only. The bottom line is is Iran's never going to have a nuclear weapon, Rubio said. Iranians reconnect after long internet shutdown. Dubai. Iranians isolated by a long internet shutdown imposed by the authorities during the war with the United States and Israel expressed joy as the social media came back to life in a country where even in normal times access to the outside world remains restricted via censorship of many websites. I have never been so happy in my life to see Telegram notifications, said Kian Galvani, an engineering student who wrote to his account on X. Who wrote on his account on Twitter. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, I think, I'm sorry if I butchered that, issued an order to reopen international internet access. Iranian state media reported on May 25th, citing an official letter after a near 90-day blackout. Reports cited the head of public relations at Iran's communication ministry. The mechanism for how and when Iran would fully reconnect to the global web was not clear. Although analysts said the decision to end the shutdown was likely driven at least in part by the economic impact of keeping businesses offline. Thomas Janau, associate fellow with the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House, said it could be turned off again swiftly if protests, as like those in January that were initially sparked by economic hardship, erupted again, or if negotiations to end the war collapsed and fighting flared up. Authorities initially imposed an internet blackout on January 8th. In a crackdown on nationwide anti-government demonstrations, which U.S.-based HRANA rights groups had said killed thousands. Connections were gradually restored in February before a new blackout was initiated following the start of the U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran on February 28th. The longest internet blackout in the history of the world has ended. Greetings after 88 days. Ali Reza Jafarzadeh, an Iranian editor, posted on his account on Instagram. Iranian Communications and Information Technology Minister Sayyid Sattar Hashimi said on May 27th that the Iranian people deserve free communication, a bright future, and a dynamic economy. The president's commitment to the reopening of the internet and restoring communication stability is a clear sign of rationality and standing with the people, Hashimi added, according to state media. Prolonged shutdowns both restrict internet freedoms and hurt businesses that depend heavily on social media to operate, taking a toll on a fragile economy battered by the war and long-standing U.S. sanctions. Keomars, an Iranian computer company who asked that only his first name be used due to security concerns, told Reuters that many people in Iran who ran businesses through Instagram and Telegram due to the high cost of renting a physical store lost everything during this blackout and have to start again from far below zero while carrying heavy debts, losses, and lost customers. Alp Toker, director of internet That monitoring group NetBlocks told Reuters on May 27th that the process of restoration could take hours, days, or even weeks in provinces. Iranians remain wary of ongoing restrictions. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Sheriff. Drug-sniffing dog at prison effective. Cassie Pritchard. Ticket Observer Dispatch, USA Today Network. Contraband and sniffing dogs was an idea born out of the COVID-19 pandemic. But after seeing its results, the Oneida County Sheriff's Office wants to make it a fixture. Here, Oneida County Sheriff Robert McCoyle, said problems were arising in prisons and correctional facilities all across the county around 2019 as the country went into lockdown. We were facing the problem of contraband coming into our correctional facility, McCoyle said. Contraband could be anything, from tobacco and marijuana to narcotics and more. It was a huge problem. McCoy continued. And we are looking for a way to get the situation under control. Because jails across the county were expecting overdoses and deaths from overdosing. Thinking outside the box led the suggestion of using a drug dog for anyone and anything entering the county correctional facility. For New York State correctional facilities under the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, K-9 officers are an integral part of drug interdiction efforts. A look at K-9 officers in prison state system. According to the DOCCS, the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, officials said in a statement, correction facilities under the DOCCS have a 33 K-9 team deployed across the state, with 7 more to be added by the end of the year. These investigators and their K-9 partners play a critical role in detecting drugs, weapons, and other illegal items that threaten the safety and security of our facilities, DOCCS officials said in a statement. In 2024, K-9 operations led to 395 visitor arrests, while in 2025 they were 218. Underscoring the effectiveness of these teams and the important role they play in maintaining safe correctional facilities across the state. K-9 Bo joins the force. This led to Bo joining the force. One of the many K-9 officers serving on the county corrections, Bo joined the sheriff's office in 2019 after being born in the Netherlands. He was purchased from Shallow Creek Kennels in Pennsylvania, trained here in narcotics detection, and assigned to the correctional facility. We looked at a German and short-hair pointer because of their keen sense of smell and the fact they're extremely intelligent, and McCoy said. Correctional Officer Merzuk Hozanvik became Bo's handler after Bo was trained and certified. Bo had several different jobs and became a regular fixture at the correctional facility. Bo's first and foremost job was at visitation. Because that's where most of the contraband was coming from, McCoy explained. We had signs made, so visitors were well aware that there was a drug detecting dog in the facility. Bo would greet visitors and walk around the visitation area, but there were multiple instances where Bo would detect something. Additionally, Bo was in the mailroom and would be one of the first ones to make sure there wasn't anything coming in for inmates. And when Hozanovic was on duty at the correction facility, he would have Bo with him. The duo found substances on several occasions while making rounds, officials said. Bo passed away following a cancer diagnosis in early May. What happens next? When asked if the Onondaga County Correctional Facility was going to get a new drug detecting dog to replace Bo, McCoy said options were being explored. A drug detecting dog can cost around $10,000, and the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office welcomed 3 new dogs to the force thanks to donations from local businesses. Many of our recent dogs have been purchased thanks to local businesses, but there's also grant funding out there for canine officers. We definitely have plans in place because Bo's work was very effective, McCoy said. Trump often repeats debunked claim. Has called 2020 election rigged more than 100 times in past 6 months. Bo Erickson, Reuters. Washington. President Donald Trump has repeated his false claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him at least 107 times in the last 6 months, keeping the grievance front and center even as he faces new political risks from the war in Iran and looming midterm elections. Trump devotes near daily attention to the issue, a Reuters reporter of his public events, interviews, and online posts found. And his comments often come in waves. One Saturday in April, amid a fragile ceasefire with Iran, and Trump posted allegations about the 2020 election when he lost to Joe Biden 7 times on his Truth Social account. Of course he did. He has rehashed his claims during at least 6 meetings with world leaders, 2 celebrations of professional sports teams, and the White House observances on Hanukkah and Christmas. In unscripted remarks at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland in January, he said, "People will soon be prosecuted for what they did." He reiterated his claims of a rigged election at a White House picnic for lawmakers and again while speaking to reporters before boarding Air Force One. "If we had Jesus Christ come down and count the votes, I would have won California," Trump said. The reliably Democratic state he lost by 29 percentage votes in 2020 and more than 20 percentage points in 2024. But it's a rigged vote. Aides and interviewers often shrug off his comments, and critics dismiss them as musings of a sore loser. But Trump's relentless focus on 2020 points to a forward-looking strategy aimed at justifying new voting restrictions, reinforcing party loyalty, and energizing supporters ahead of the November elections that will determine control of Congress, according to 2 new White House officials and 2 people familiar with the matter who were granted anonymity to speak candidly. President Trump is committed to ensuring that Americans have full confidence in the administration of elections, and that includes totally accurate and up-to-date voter rolls free of errors and unlawfully registered non-citizen voters. White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson said in a statement. Trump's rhetoric has gained traction among Republican voters. A Reuters Ipsos poll in April found that 63% of Republican voters believe Trump's false claim that the 2020 election was stolen, a share that has remained largely unchanged in recent years. An even bigger share of Republicans, 82%, said they agreed large numbers of fraudulent ballots were cast by non-citizens in new U.S. elections. In the meantime, Trump has used his 2020 claims to deflect the blame for intractable global conflicts and domestic policy disputes. In December, as the war in Ukraine dragged on despite Trump's 2024 campaign pledge to resolve it in a day, he told the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that the rigged U.S. election around for Russia's 2022 invasion. In February, he told families who lost their loved ones in immigration-related crimes that they would be home with your son, daughter, if the election had not been rigged. The 2020 election has also become a loyalty test for many of Trump's nominees for key federal roles, including judicial positions, who have refused under oath to tell Democratic senators that Biden won. Nevertheless, instead, they say that only the Congress certified the election in his favor. Nevertheless, some Republicans are pushing back. Right Count, a group of Republicans in battleground states, recently relaunched a campaign to defend the integrity of state-administered elections and counter Trump's efforts to nationalize them. All the accusations that have been made have been refuted, but he doesn't want to listen, said former Arizona Governor Jan Brewer, a supporter of Trump and a member of the group. After losing his Republican primary in Louisiana on May 16th, after Trump refused to back him, Senator Bill Cassidy took aim at the president's election rigging claims in his concession speech. Cassidy drew the president's wrath by supporting his impeachment after the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack by Trump supporters trying to stop the 2020 election certification. When you want to participate in democracy, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you want it to, Cassidy said. But you don't pout, you don't whine, you don't claim the election was stolen. Judge declines to block order on mail-in voting. Luke Cohen. A U.S. judge on May 28th declined to block President Donald Trump's executive order tightening rules on mail-in voting in a loss for the Democratic Party. Whose lawyers argued that it could disenfranchise millions of voters. The decision comes as Trump's Republicans are locked in a tight battle to keep both control of Congress and in both houses of Congress in November midterm elections. Trump has, for years, claimed that has put the false claim that his 2020 election defeat was the result of widespread voter fraud and has criticized voting by mail. The executive order signed by Donald Trump on March 31st directed his administration to compile a list of confirmed U.S. citizens eligible to vote in each state and to use federal data to help state election officials verify who is eligible to vote. It also required the U.S. Postal Service to only deliver ballots to voters on each state's approved mail-in ballot list, and require states to preserve election-related records for 5 years. In rejecting a request by plaintiffs, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, D. New York, that he issue a preliminary injunction blocking the measure. Washington-based U.S. District Judge Carl Nicholas wrote that the Democrats had brought the case too early because the government had not produced any flawed citizenship lists and the Postal Service had not yet implemented any new rules. Given that the executive order does not command plaintiffs to do anything and that no agency has acted yet acted pursuant to the order in a way that could harm plaintiffs, they have not suffered any harm at present. Note Nicholas, who was appointed by Trump. The judge said the Democrats could ask for an injunction again after federal agencies took steps to implement the order. Democrats argued that the order infringed on individual states' rights to regulate elections under the U.S. Constitution. A coalition of Democratic states brought a similar lawsuit challenging the executive order in the federal court in Boston. U.S. District Attorney Indira Talwani, an appointee of former President Barack Obama, is due to hear arguments in that case on June 2nd. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Death toll likely to rise from explosion at plant. Janine Santucci. USA Today. Let's do this. The death toll was expected to rise in a Washington town after a chemical tank exploded at an industrial plant. The tank at Nippon on Dinaware Packaging in Longview, Washington, ruptured May 26th in what Governor Bob Ferguson said was likely the deadliest industrial disaster in modern state history. One person was initially confirmed dead, then another from injuries. 9 employees remain unaccounted for as of May 27th, authorities said, and were presumed dead. 7 employees were injured, as was one firefighter. Authorities have not released the identities of the victims. Efforts shift to rescue and recovery as crews work to stabilize the scene enough to safely search for the missing employee. Once located, they will undergo decontamination and be identified by the country coroner, officials said at a state news conference on May 27th. The paper mill and liquid packaging plant had a history of fires and alleged violations. USA Today reached out to Nippon Dinaware for comment. First responders, emergency workers, and nurses saw the unspeakable horrors, said Rep. Murray Glusenkamp Perez, D. Washington. We need to pull together to get the answers that we need. Some of the liquid contaminated the Columbia River and nearby ditches and dikes, officials said. The Washington Department of Ecology said in a statement that the water was being flushed through a ditch system to dilute it and draw it away from residential areas and the city's water supply. Officials said there was no airborne contamination. Of course there wasn't. There is currently no concern that the drinking water supplies have been impacted, the ecological department said. However, the longer the contaminated water remains in the ditch system, the greater the potential for it to contaminate the underlying aquifer. The Washington State Department of Labor and Industries said it had 2 inspections open at Nippon Software. One began in March after the department received an anonymous complaint about a valve on an aqua ammonia clarifier tank. Not the same tank in the explosion, the department said. Another inspection was opened earlier in May after a complaint about a sinkhole caused by a failed drain. The department inspected the facility 3 other times in the past 5 years and was cited for violations unrelated to chemicals and storage. The violations were instead related to issues such as fall protection or failure to wear face coverings, the Labor and Industries Department said. The department also investigated after an employee whose fingers was amputated, local and TV station KING reported. Nippon Dinaware was cited for moving equipment involved before it could be inspected, but not for the incident itself, the news outlet reported. In August 2025, a fire at Nippon Dynawave's properties destroyed a railway warehouse. The Longview Fire Department said at the time, the Patriot Rail's Cowlitz and Columbia Railway warehouse and locomotive repair shop where the fire began was a total loss. In July 2023, firefighters battled a blaze on the property for 4 days after a conveyor belt spread to the bark chip piles and structures, according to Cowlitz 2 Fire and Rescue. Alright, you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Your reader has been Tommy DeLeo. Thank you for listening.